You can't lead anyone if you can't lead yourself. And in 2026, that truth has never been louder. We've built machines that think faster than us, but forgot how to think deeper than them. The real challenge isn't managing others, it's mastering your own direction. So stay with me. At the end, I'll leave a moment of quiet, not to end this message, but to let it begin inside you. Have you ever noticed how strangely the world has changed and yet somehow stayed the same? In 2026, we have more computing power in our pockets than the first space programs did. We lead teams through screens, talk to artificial intelligence, yet we still wake up in the morning with the same question a farm boy in Idaho asked himself many years ago: who leads me today, circumstances or myself? Leadership has never been about titles. It's about who you see in the mirror at 5 in the morning when the likes haven't come, the emails haven't arrived, and the decisions can't wait any longer. In this new era, we've learned to manage data, but far too often we forget to manage our own attention. And without attention, there is no influence. Without influence, there is no change. And to be honest, you can't lead people you don't listen to, and you can't listen to people if you can't hear the silence inside yourself. People often ask me, Jim, what's new to know about leadership in 2026? There's a lot that's new. The speed of cycles, the fragility of trust, team fatigue, information noise, a culture of constant updates. But the foundation hasn't changed. Just like 40 years ago, the rule is simple. Work on yourself more than on your circumstances. Why? Because circumstances will always do what they do, change. But character, discipline, and clarity are the soil where you plant the seeds of influence. Sow carelessness, and you'll reap chaos in your projects. Sow respect, and you'll reap loyalty in times of crisis. Sow example, and you'll reap trust without commands. I like to say the first step of leadership isn't stepping onto a stage, it's stepping into yourself. Open your notebook, call things by their names, look at the numbers, the habits, the rhythm of your day. It doesn't hurt, but it's honest. And honesty is a currency your team can feel in their skin. There's another trap of our time. We confuse loudness with strength. It seems like you need to shout, rush, show, post, but real influence is born not from noise, but from consistency. I learned this the hard way. When you set yourself the task of leading others, first bring order to 3 things: your thoughts, your words, and your daily actions. Thoughts are the steering wheel, words are the road, actions are the steps. If your steering wheel points north, the road is marked east, and your steps go west. Your team will feel the dissonance faster than you can prepare your next presentation. In 2026, people don't follow positions. They follow inner alignment within the leader so that what he thinks matches what he says and what he does, especially when the cameras are off. I believe in leadership through invitation, not through fear, not through coercion, not through labels on a business card. Invitation is when your own discipline silently offers others to rise to the next level. It's when you don't say, do as I said, but live in such a way that people want to try your rhythm, your way of planning, your respect for time. Yes, technology has accelerated everything, sales, hiring, firing, learning, but there's no button to speed up maturity. The seed still needs a season, and that's good news for a leader. If you're ready to work through the spring and autumn of your team through seasons of growth and storms of failure, you'll ultimately gather more than you sowed, because that's the law. The return is always greater. Let's be honest. In 2026, we're not afraid of a lack of technology. We're afraid of a lack of clarity. We're overwhelmed by too many tools and too little meaning. So this episode isn't about clever management tricks. It's about the inner architecture of a leader, about a faith that looks at reality directly, sees it as better than it is, and takes steps to make it so, about the law of averages that saves beginners and disciplines masters, about the ability to work with those who deserve it and to teach those ready to move from I have to I deserve to, and about one simple thing that separates a true leader from a speaker on stage: the willingness to be a father or mother to your own home before you claim someone else's company. Family is the first team where your leadership is tested, not because it's more romantic that way, but because there people see you without decorations. Let me say this in advance, so we set the right rhythm. Sometimes the lesson isn't in the words, it's in the silence after them. So today, I invite you not just to listen, but to live what's been said. At the end, I'll leave a few quiet minutes. Don't rush to the next video. Let your thoughts settle like families after a long road trip. Silence isn't the end. It's part of the process, because leadership begins where you can endure your own silence and hear in it responsibility, calling, and a concrete plan for tomorrow. So, let's begin. You and I will break leadership down into simple blocks, but each of them will require one habit from you to take one small step today. I'll ask questions, give images, issue challenges, and from time to time we'll take an inner pause so we don't turn wisdom into noise. If you're ready, open your notebook, write down the date, write one sentence. I am the leader of my life in 2026, because that's how influence is born. From a decision confirmed by daily action. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll have not only a map, you'll have a few quiet minutes for that map to become your road. When I was 25, I thought leadership was a microphone and a title. I believed you became a leader when you were given a position or trusted with a team. And then I met my mentor, Mr. Schoff. He looked at me and said, Jim, if you want to lead people, learn to lead yourself, because without inner management, the outer kind is just theater. And that's when I first understood. Discipline isn't about controlling others. It's about keeping the promises you make to yourself. Have you ever noticed it's easier to keep promises to others than to yourself? We tell our colleagues, I'll get it done by tomorrow, and we really try. But how many times have you told yourself, I'll start a new routine, I'll go to bed earlier, I'll start reading, and then postponed it? That gap isn't small. That's where a leader's weakness begins. Because when you can't trust yourself, your team feels it instinctively. Leadership doesn't begin with others' trust. It begins with self-respect. One evening, Mr. Schoff told me, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. I didn't understand it then. I was poor. I needed to earn a living. But he explained, if you work on your job, you make a living. If you work on yourself, you make a future. So I took a notebook, a simple pad, and started writing down what I read, what I thought, what habits I needed to change. A year later, I looked back at those pages and saw a completely different person. Because growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like one quiet evening with a pen in your hand. Do you know what distinguishes a true leader in 2026? Not the number of likes, not powerful speeches, not even leading hundreds of people. It's the ability to stay calm when everything around is chaos. The world now is a stream. News changes every hour, technology every week, teams every quarter. And if you don't have an inner center, that stream will sweep you away. So the first task of a leader is to create calm within. Because people are drawn not to the perfect, but to the stable. They need someone whose silence is louder than others' panic. And I'm not talking about fake calm, not about wearing the everything's fine mask. I mean that inner confidence born from doing your part honestly. When you feel, I did what I promised, I prepared, I studied, I showed up on time, then you can stand calm even in a storm. Because confidence isn't talent, it's the result of discipline. And when I see young leaders who want to motivate others, I ask them, who do you motivate at 7 in the morning when it's still dark? If you can lift yourself, you can lift your team. True leadership isn't control, it's attraction. And it follows the same laws as nature. You reap what you sow, but first you must choose what to plant. If you plant anger, you'll harvest resistance. If you plant respect, you'll harvest trust. If you plant example, you'll harvest imitation. And remember one more thing. The harvest is always greater than the seed. Good or bad, it will return multiplied. So pay attention to small things. They're not small, they're the seeds of your leadership. Once I watched a farmer in Kansas. He told me, I can do everything right, sow, water, care for the crops, but sometimes hail destroys it all. I asked, and what do you do then? He smiled, I sow again. Leadership is just like that. Sometimes you invest in a person, a project, a team, and then everything falls apart. But if you're a true leader, you sow again. Because you believe in the law of averages. If you do the right thing long enough, results will come. Not every day, but on average. And the average always rewards consistency. Today we live in a world that loves quick wins. People want a formula. how to inspire a team in 3 steps, how to manage stress in 5 minutes. But true leadership isn't measured in steps, it's measured in seasons. Like a farmer, you must accept the rhythm. Spring is for sowing, summer for caring, autumn for harvesting, winter for planting. If you want to reap in the fall, don't skip spring, even when it's cold. Sometimes the cold is a test of your faith. I often say faith is the ability to see things as they can become. It's not naivety, it's the discipline of vision. Because a leader must look at chaos and see order, at problems and see opportunity. But here's another secret. Faith isn't against truth. If something doesn't work, admit it. If someone isn't pulling their weight, don't close your eyes. Seeing reality is also faith, because only those who see can change. And then take the second step, see it better. And the third, make it better. These are the 3 levels of leadership faith. See, imagine, act. Now, take a pause. Think about what in your life right now needs spring. Where do you need to plant new discipline, a new habit, a new example? Don't be afraid to start small. Because if you wait for the perfect moment, you'll miss the season. I know because I once waited too. Waited for money, for inspiration, for the right people. But Mr. Shelf told me, Jim, don't wait for it to get easier. Get stronger. And that changed everything because while others waited, I worked on myself. And the world began to change in response. Leadership isn't about how many people report to you. It's about how many people follow you, even when you're not there. And you know how to check that? Look at your team on the days you're silent. If they're still moving, you're a leader. If everything freezes without you, you're a manager. And there are plenty of managers. Leaders are rare. And that difference is born not in the office, but in the morning when you decide, get up or stay in bed, because the one who can't lead their morning won't be able to lead any day. And here's the paradox. The more the world automates, the more we need people who can manage not machines, but themselves. An algorithm has no conscience, but a leader does, and that's his strength. In the age of artificial intelligence, the true leader is the one who remains deeply human, calm, attentive, whole. So start today with something simple. Write down what you promise yourself to do tomorrow and do it. Because every small promise is a brick in your credibility. And when people see that you keep your own word, they'll want to follow you, even through the storm. When I first started speaking, I thought a leader had to be loud. I talked a lot, persuaded, pushed, wanted to inspire through force. But one day after a seminar, a man came up to me and said, Jim, you spoke wonderfully. But you know what I remember most? The way you listened. And that's when I understood. Inspiration is born not from volume, but from presence. People don't follow those who speak best. They follow those who see them. We live in a world where everyone talks. But true leadership begins where you stop and listen, not only to others, but to yourself. Because if you don't understand your own inner voice, you'll start copying others. And then your leadership becomes a show. And people sense falseness faster than you can hit schedule post. Inspiration is not a command, it's an invitation, and it always speaks quietly. When you live in such a way that your actions become your argument, you don't need many words. A leader who works on himself doesn't have to force others. He attracts them. It's like the law of gravity in relationships. You attract what matches your level of energy. If you're tired, scattered, insincere, those are the kinds of people who will come to you. But if you're steady, calm, and focused, you become a magnet for those who also want to grow. Mr. Schoaf once told me, don't try to manage people, work with those who deserve it. At first, that sounded harsh to me, but he explained, leadership isn't about dragging everyone along. Your job is to lift those who are ready to rise. In business, in family, in friendship, it's all the same. If you spend your energy on those who don't want to move, you lose the chance to develop those who could become the next leaders. That's not indifference, that's love through responsibility. Because if you keep rescuing people who refuse to learn how to swim, you'll drown with them. I've seen companies build their teams through fear. Do it or you'll lose your job. Stay because we're all one, and I've seen others build through belief. Let's do this because it's right. And you know what's interesting? The first group saw results for a month, the second for years. Because fear drains, inspiration fuels. When people feel that you see potential in them, they start to see it themselves. And when they start seeing it, they grow without pressure. A young manager once asked me, "Jim, how can I make my team give 100%? I said, "Don't make them. Infect them." Commitment doesn't come from orders. It comes from shared purpose. If people see you're willing to go first, they'll go second. If they see you're honest when it's hard, they'll stay. That's the law of reflection. The world doesn't mirror our words. It mirrors our state. I love the story about a father who every morning left little notes in his son's lunchbox. Be proud of yourself. I believe in you. One day he forgot. And you know what the boy did? He wrote himself a note because the example had already become part of his nature. That's leadership, when you can step away and your example keeps working. But here's another secret. Leadership through inspiration requires patience. You can't demand a harvest where the seeds are still growing. If people haven't blossomed yet, it's not always their fault. Maybe the soil just isn't warm enough yet. Sometimes a bit of warmth from your attention is all someone needs to bloom. Not everyone grows at the same pace, but if you see progress, even small, acknowledge it. Say, "I see you're moving forward." Those simple words can be someone's fuel for a week. Leadership in 2026 isn't a management technology. It's the art of presence. When you look someone in the eye and don't think about the next meeting. When you listen not to respond, but to understand. When you choose trust over control. That's not weakness. That's a strategy of strength. Because trust is credit you extend to someone, and it usually comes back with interest. And one more thing, don't be afraid to be human. People aren't looking for a perfect leader. They're looking for a real one. Someone who admits mistakes, laughs at his own stories, and gives thanks sincerely. Authenticity is the new currency of influence. Because in a world of artificial filters, honesty shines the brightest. Now let's take a short pause. Think of someone on your team who doesn't need control, but an invitation, who doesn't need a command, but faith. Think about how you can show that faith tomorrow, and write it down. Because when a leader begins to act from inspiration, even one example starts a wave, and that wave keeps moving, even when you're silent. When I was young and impatient, I thought the most important thing was to leave a mark. I wanted my name to be known, to be talked about, to matter. But over the years, I've realized that true leadership isn't when your name is quoted, it's when your principles remain in people's hearts, even if they no longer remember who taught them. Because leadership isn't about volume, it's about influence that endures. I've seen many talented leaders burn out because they wanted everything at once. They built businesses, projects, even empires, but they didn't build people. And when everything fell apart, they wondered why. It's because true success isn't what you create. It's what remains after you. If you haven't raised someone who can carry on your work, you haven't led, you've only managed. Once I was speaking to a group of young entrepreneurs. One of them asked, "Jim, how do you know when you've done enough?" I smiled and said, "When someone you've taught does it better than you." That's the leader's true victories, when your students surpass you. And you know what? That doesn't diminish you. On the contrary, it proves your seed has grown. I call this the oak effect. A small acorn doesn't try to be everything. It just grows. And when it becomes a tree, it gives shade to others, and its fruit becomes the beginning of new trees. Leadership works the same way. It creates conditions where others can become stronger. Not because you're pulling them up, but because you've given them space and an example. In 2026, this principle is more important than ever. We live in a time when people are tired of performative leadership. They're not looking for a boss, but for a mentor. Not for a manager, but for an example. And if you want your team to stay with you for the long run, learn to see them not as tools, but as successors. Teach them to think like leaders, decide like owners, and take responsibility like adults. Show them that trust isn't a risk, it's a reward. Do you remember when I spoke about the law of sowing and reaping? Its final part goes like this. Sometimes you reap not what you sowed, but what someone else sowed, inspired by you. That's the greatest gift, when your actions become part of someone else's story. And that's what separates a leader from a doer. A doer lives within his own results, but a leader lives within the seeds that keep growing after him. I know that today we live in a world of rapid change, and it tempts us to do everything ourselves. No one can do it better than I can. But let me tell you, if that's true, you're not a leader. You're just a master. The leader's job isn't to be the best, but to create an environment where others can become the best. Yes, it's harder. Yes, it's slower. But it's the only thing that's worth the time. Because one day you'll want to stop, take a breath, and see that everything keeps moving without you. And that will be the sweetest moment of peace. In my career, I've stood on many stages, but the most precious one was quiet. After a seminar, a man came up to me. He'd been at my first talk 10 years earlier. He said, "Jim, back then I was jobless and uncertain. Now I lead a team of 30 people. And you know what's interesting? I'm teaching them the same things you taught me." And I thought, this is the relay. Leadership is a marathon of generations. So if today you're leading a team, a family, or even just yourself, don't focus only on results. Think about legacy. What principles will remain after you? What ideas will keep echoing when your voice is gone? What culture of behavior, thinking, and respect are you sowing every day? Because one day the words will stop, and your example will keep speaking. And here we come to the essence. Leadership isn't a story about victory. It's a story about responsibility and the ability to lift others higher than you stand yourself. And at the end of that journey, you'll find that the greatest leadership is silence. Silence in which the seeds of your actions grow. Silence in which the next generation finds its voice. So as we close this chapter, I want you to remember, when words stop, reflection begins. Sometimes the deepest message isn't a phrase, but the space between them. The space where ideas settle like seeds on fertile ground. Soon we'll move on to practice, but before that, take a brief pause. Just breathe. Picture the people you lead. Imagine them growing stronger, and understand that is the true reward of a leader. Because when someone learns to lead themselves because of you, your influence becomes endless. And now let's do what I love most. Let's see how deeply you've lived this conversation. Because knowledge without reflection is just noise. But knowledge that turns into self-assessment becomes power. I want you right now not to stop anything, not to open a new tab, not to run to your notifications. Just listen and think as you go. This is your moment of silence and motion. We'll rate ourselves on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 means I'm just beginning. 10 means I live this every day. There are no right or wrong answers, only honesty. And honesty is the first step toward leadership. First question, how consistently do I keep the promises I make to myself? Not to the team, not to the family, not to the world, to myself. Because leadership begins where no one sees. If you gave yourself a 5, think about one promise you could keep tomorrow to raise that score by even 1 point. Small steps, great seeds. Second question, how much do I inspire others by my example rather than by my words? When you walk into a room, does the energy of others rise? If not, don't force it. Ignite your own light. Remember, a true leader doesn't say, go ahead. He goes first. Your walk is the most powerful speech you will ever give. Third question, how honestly do I see my reality? Without embellishment, without fear. Faith doesn't ignore truth. It begins with it. If something isn't working today, tell yourself that. Not for self-criticism, but for freedom. Because only the one who sees can change. Think about what in your life needs an honest look today. Fourth question, how much do I create an atmosphere of trust around me? Not of control, not of fear, but of space where people can flourish. Think of someone near you who's afraid to take a step. What can you do to replace their fear with faith? Sometimes it takes just one look. Without judgment, only understanding. That's how trust is born. Fifth question, how willing am I to let go of control and allow others to grow? Many leaders lose their strength because they hold on to everything. But let me remind you, the greatest legacy is people who can carry your work forward without you. If you've truly taught, let go. A tree doesn't cling to every fruit. It simply gives life onward. Now look at your answers. Don't judge yourself harshly. Be thankful for your honesty. Because honesty is a mirror not everyone dares to face. You've already done something most people postpone. You stop to think. And that in itself is an act of leadership. If this moment resonates with you, subscribe, leave a comment. Not for the algorithm, for yourself. Write down one sentence you're taking away from this video. Maybe someone will read it tomorrow, and that will be their first step. And now, before the finale, I want to give you a small reminder. When the words stop, don't rush to turn it off. Because after this, there will be a few minutes of calm, a space for reflection. This isn't a pause, it's part of the process. As I said earlier, sometimes the strongest ideas are born in the silence that follows them. There is a moment when all words become unnecessary, when instead of loud plans and posts, there remains only one quiet voice inside that says, "You can. Start now." And it's from that voice that new life begins, new leadership, new strength. Not from inspiration, but from decision. Not from dreaming, but from doing. My mentor once said, "Jim, don't be afraid to be the one who lights a candle in the dark. Because the light of one candle matters more than 1,000 complaints about the darkness." And I remembered that for life. A leader isn't the one who waits for the world to change. It's the one who starts changing himself, even when it's dark. Because it's there, in the dark, that true faith is tested. Maybe today you feel tired, doubtful, or low on faith. But let me tell you, this is not the end. It's the soil. It's from days like these that new strength grows. Every failure, every delay, every wrong time moment, all of it is part of your training to become someone greater than you were yesterday. Don't run from them. Use them. Because when you learn the lesson, pain stops being an enemy. It becomes a teacher. Remember, true leadership isn't loud. It doesn't need a stage. It begins when you do today what you promised yourself yesterday. And if you keep that promise every day, one day people will say, "I became better beside this person." And that will be your highest title. And now, I want you to simply take a breath. Feel these words settle inside you. Don't rush to the next video. Don't scroll. Sit still, look out the window, or close your eyes. What I say next isn't a speech. It isn't advice. It's silence. Let's sit in silence for a moment. Let these ideas find their place. Don't rush to the next thing. Stay with yourself, because sometimes real change doesn't come at the moment you hear the words. It comes in the silence after them, and it's there, in that silence, that your true leadership begins.